Thanks so much for watching Spectrum Bay News 9. I'm Rick Elmhorst. It's time to go in depth. Governor Ron DeSantis has signed a bill that allows the state to fine social media companies $250,000 a day if they remove the account of a statewide candidate and $25,000 a day for removing the account of a local candidate. Residents could also sue a social media company if they feel that company has inconsistently applied their terms of service. And joining me now to discuss this new law is Tampa attorney Richard Lawson. Richard, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. My pleasure.
All right, Richard, this law, obviously it raises a lot of political and particularly First Amendment questions. What's the stated goal of the law? What's it really designed to do according to its authors and proponents?
Sure. I think this law has two key provisions. One is as it relates to political candidates and political candidates being deplatformed, as they say, blocked from access to some of the larger social media websites. The other core aspect of the law is it allows for, it commands, and this is actually kind of new and interesting, it commands the social media companies to say what their policies are for what content will be removed, and then it specifically allows users to bring their own action if they feel like those policies are being unevenly applied. So those are the two biggest buckets that this law really applies to. One is the political candidates, the other is the average user whose comments may have been deplatformed or who feel that they themselves feel like they're seeing an uneven application and the company's standards for what it will remove.
Richard, first let's talk about this provision that has gives the state the ability to sue these social media companies if they deplatform political candidates legally. Do you think something like that could hold up in court? Because obviously, if the state sues, it's not like the social media company is going to go, "Oh yeah, you're right. Okay, we're not going to do this." They're going to challenge, that lawsuit.
Yeah. Well, So I think you've put your finger on what will be the provision that is going to be most quickly challenged by social media companies. This is putting an affirmative onus on them. A little bit of a dive into this particular section. My reading of the law is such that a political candidate is sort of objectively defined. This is going to be somebody who has actually qualified for office. It's not like I'm going to anoint myself a political candidate and therefore I may never be removed. It does seem to be, as I'm reading the law, it does seem to be pretty tightly focused that if you have qualified for office and during the tenure of the campaign, you can't be removed. This is a real, very interesting question as to its chances of survival. And it's all going to depend in any legal challenge that is raised to this burden imposed on social media companies. It's all going to depend on how the courts are going to interpret the practical role of social media companies in the economy today. 10 years ago, there was a big effort underway by the Federal Trade Commission to look into and possibly investigate and prosecute Google for antitrust violations. And the slogan then, 10 years ago, was competition is a click away, which is a very succinct, tight, focused response to that issue. Today, particularly in light of the whole debacle, if you will, over that whole Parler app, where the competition was a click away, and then all of a sudden the servers were denied access, or Amazon denied Parler access to Amazon servers. So is competition really a click away anymore? And so it's really going to depend on how the courts review the on-the-ground facts as it applies to the viability of a political candidate who is denied access to these platforms. And that's going to be very interesting to see how the courts rule. And it's going to be very, very factually driven. A lot of testimony about experts bringing in and showing network effects and the size of the companies and the reach.
So Richard, real quickly, I want to get into this issue of the private individuals who say the companies are unfairly, enforcing their terms of service. Most of these complaints, admittedly, are coming from conservatives. Their argument is, all right, we're conservative, the tech companies lean to the left, so they're going to put the hammer down on us. They say that they put all of this work into getting an audience, and then somebody, and they don't even know who, maybe at the company or why they're being deplatformed or their content is being restricted, and they say, all right, we've got this legal agreement. You're not following the legal agreement on your end by unfairly enforcing these terms of service. The question is, could we see a lot of frivolous lawsuits too? You got, 20 million people in Florida that could bring a lawsuit.
Yeah, so one key distinction here as it relates to the private causes of action, where the bill seems to really mandate that the qualified official who's running for office can't be deplatformed. As I'm reading the provisions as it relates to terms of service, a tech company come out and say, we don't like anybody whose hair is pink and tweets on Sundays. And if your hair is pink and tweet on Sundays, we're going to remove you, right? They can say whatever policy they want, the social media companies. They could come out and say, we don't like conservatives. We don't like liberals. We don't like Democrats. We don't like Republicans. If you're one of those, we're going to wipe you out. I don't see any burden placed on the companies to say we have to treat everybody fairly. The burden that is placed is that they have to say what they're going to do with content, and then they have to live up to it. And if they don't, as I'm reading the law, any user of the platform, not just the user whose content was removed, but anybody on the platform who sees an uneven application would have a standing to sue. This will obviously be defended by the big tech companies if they were to get such a lawsuit, saying, hey, no, the only people who can challenge this are the people who actually had their content removed. The counter argument to that is going to be, hey, wait a minute, I signed up for the service. You told me the service was going to be provided, and the only things you would eliminate would be under criteria X, Y, and Z. And now I'm seeing, hey, you wiped this guy out under X, Y, and Z, but you let this guy who's doing X, Y, Z stay on. What's going on here? This is uneven. Yeah.
Richard, this is something we could talk about for hours because there are so many things to talk about. But thank you so much for joining us today on In Depth.
My pleasure.